Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a text that tackles a really profound and honestly kind of uncomfortable question. We're going to look at why human willpower alone might be entirely powerless to fix the human heart, and why, according to this source, a divine intervention isn't just helpful, it's absolutely required. Let's get right into it.
So, here's the big question right off the bat. Can human willpower actually change the human heart? I mean, really change it? To get what the text is saying here, we have to understand the core problem it presents. It's describing a deep, fundamental loss of harmony between humanity and the divine. We're talking about a shift in human nature so severe that self-correction is completely off the table.
The text sets up this massive contrast. On one side, you've got humanity's original state. Think joyful communion, totally pure thoughts, just complete harmony with God. Sounds great, right? But then, through disobedience, we end up with the unrenewed heart. The author argues that human nature became so weakened and twisted by selfishness that we now naturally shrink away from holy beings. We operate on totally alien motives, and we find absolutely zero joy in holiness. In fact, the source makes this completely startling, counterintuitive claim. It says, heaven would be to him a place of torture. No way, right? But think about it for a second. The text is suggesting that if an unrenewed person were somehow just let into heaven, the pure, unselfish love reigning up there would literally feel like a consuming fire to them. They'd be a totally discordant note in the melody of heaven, just desperately wanting to hide. It's a brilliant, if intense, way to frame just how deep this alienation goes.
Okay, let's move on to our next section, the illusion of self-help and why our absolute best tools fail.
Now in our modern world, we lean super heavily on self-improvement, right? We've got education, culture, sheer willpower, and good old-fashioned human effort. And look, the author totally acknowledges that these things have their proper sphere in life. But, and this is a massive but, when it comes to changing your actual heart or purifying the real springs of your life, the text says they are entirely powerless. To really hammer this home, the text pulls from the ancient biblical wisdom of Job, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. This is basically the logical anchor of the whole argument. You simply cannot squeeze a clean heart out of a fundamentally unclean nature just by trying harder. The math just doesn't work. So, it all comes down to the difference between outward and inward change. Sure, human effort can totally buy you outward correctness. Changing your behavior, acting the part of a good person. But true inward change, that requires a power working from the inside out. A totally new life from above. The text actually calls the idea that we just need to develop the natural good inside of us a fatal deception. True change has to be an intervention, not just a personal evolution.
Let's see how this plays out personally in our next section, the Apostles' despair and the limits of the law.
We're looking at the Apostle Paul here, and intellectually, the guy had it completely figured out. He perceived God's loving kindness, he clearly discerned the wisdom and justice of the law, and he even fully agreed that the law is good. But here's the catch. Despite this perfect textbook understanding, he found himself completely unable to actually attain purity on his own. All that head knowledge just didn't translate into the power to change his human nature. Just totally overwhelmed by this captivity to sin, Paul cries out this desperate, agonizing question, "O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death?" And our source material points out that this isn't just Paul venting. This is an echo from burdened hearts across all lands, all throughout history. It is the ultimate realization of human inability. So, if we are totally unable to fix ourselves, what exactly is the answer? That brings us to bridging the infinite gulf and the divine solution. The text answers Paul's cry with this highly cinematic Old Testament metaphor about Jacob. It happens in 3 phases. First, nightfall hits. Jacob is fleeing his home, weighed down with guilt, feeling completely lonely and totally cut off from heaven. Then, the dream. He's sleeping on the bare earth, and he sees this strange light and these vast, shadowy stairs reaching all the way up to heaven. Finally, the revelation. Angels are descending, and a Savior is revealed, showing a literal pathway back to God. Now, what is this mystic ladder from the dream? The text defines it as representing Jesus Christ. It argues that because of human apostasy, the earth was completely severed from heaven. So Christ steps in as the sole medium of communication. He is the only bridge spanning that impossible, infinite gulf that our alienation created. As the text beautifully puts it, with his own merits, Christ has bridged the gulf which sin had made. Through this one specific divine intervention,
Helpless, fallen humanity is finally reconnected to the source of infinite power. It's this exact bridge that allows those ministering angels from Jacob's dream to actually hold communion with us. Which brings us to our final section, God's ultimate sacrifice and the sheer effort of heaven.
To actually bridge this massive gulf, God didn't just send down a self-help manual. The text lists an incredible mobilization of heaven's resources, the Savior's life and death, the active, everyday ministry of angels, the pleading of the Spirit, and the Father working above all of it. The author states that God essentially poured out all heaven in one gift. It's a massive, coordinated effort to reclaim humanity.
And the motivation behind all of this effort? It's pretty simple but incredibly deep. The text says, "The heart of God yearns over his earthly children with a love stronger than death." Everything we just talked about, the agencies, the rewards, the massive sacrifice, it's all put into motion purely out of this boundless love. It's really an earnest plea for us to place ourselves in right relation to that love, instead of stubbornly relying on our own failing willpower.
So we're left with this really provocative final thought to chew on. Shall we not regard the mercy of God? What more could he do? When you consider our complete inability to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, and then look at this universe-spanning sacrifice made on our behalf, what more could literally be done? Thanks for tuning into this explainer. Keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.